My name is Martin Ostera. I grew up playing sports in Virginia, went to parties, knew how to talk to people. Georgetown should have been easy. Sure, there's a campus with quads and dorms, but Georgetown sells itself on DC, and everyone seemed so comfortable navigating the city. It made going out feel weirdly intimidating to someone still finding their footing. Blair and Logan weren't really party people either. Blair came from money, and it felt like she'd always had her shit together, and everything came easy to her. Logan was sharp, but never really seemed to believe it. For a while, we limited our college experience to grabbing food, studying, and keeping things low-key. I didn't really mind. It felt good having friends who didn't need constant noise. But when sophomore year rolled around, Logan surprised me when he said, "We should start going out more. I want to feel like an actual college student." I certainly didn't need any convincing, but it seemed like he was trying to persuade himself that this was something he actually wanted. Blair was skeptical at first, but Logan kept pushing, so we started hitting bars in DuPont and Adams Morgan. Nothing crazy, just the three of us trying to figure out what college was supposed to look like in DC. In late October, Blair told us about a party in Roslyn. Some guy she'd met in one of her classes had invited her. She had the address written in her phone, and I wasn't going to take no for an answer. We made the journey on foot across the Key Bridge that night. The evening was much warmer than the one before, creating a humid fog that obscured our forward vision. Once we were across the Potomac, it hit me how much different Roslyn felt from Georgetown or DC proper. It was much more vertical and far less historic. The party we were looking for was on the 10th floor of this building that looked more like a corporate high-rise than an apartment. The second the elevator doors opened, I could hear the bass thumping through the paper-thin walls. The door was cracked, and I could see bodies pressed together inside. Logan looked at Blair, and Blair looked at me. "We should just go. This isn't really our scene," Logan said. "We literally just got here," I replied defensively. Blair was already turning towards the elevator when I said, "Come on," louder than I meant to. "We crossed the bridge. Let's just have a drink and see where it goes." They hesitated, but I could see Logan giving in to my request. Inside, Blair found the guy who'd invited her, and they started talking near the kitchen, while Logan and I forced ourselves to look like we belonged. We grabbed beers from a cooler while Logan kept pretending to check his phone. I made small talk with some girl who went to GW until she drifted away. The music inside was too loud to think, let alone hold a conversation. But I could already feel the alcohol working its magic, turning the cramped space into a good time. After another hour of drinking, the three of us ended up on the back deck with this guy we'd met earlier. He'd introduced himself as Joran. He was short, maybe 5'7", with black hair and thick eyebrows. He had some kind of accent I couldn't really place. Eastern European maybe, or something else entirely. He was kind of annoying, if I'm being honest, especially the way he stood too close when he talked or how he kept touching his shoulder to make a point. But I didn't really want to be a dick about it. Blair seemed fine with him, and Logan was actually smiling for once. Plus, the deck was better than inside. It was cooler and provided air you could actually breathe. A low fog clung to the street level, swallowing the view below us. "You guys want to see something else?" Joran said, grinning at Logan while he pulled out a deck of cards from his pocket and started shuffling. I groaned internally, but Logan nodded, looking genuinely interested. Joran's hands moved fast, and when he finished, he fanned the cards out. "Pick one and don't show me." Logan pulled a card from the deck but paused before looking at it. He stared at it and then back to me for a second and then shook his head. "Wait, I don't want this one." Joran stopped shuffling and looked at him with an easy smile. "There's no shame in changing your mind." Logan hesitated, placing the card back and pulling another. He held it up so only Blair and I could see. A 6 of clubs. He slid it back into the deck. Thanks again for inviting me, Yoren said suddenly while reshuffling the cards again. I mean it, you guys are cool. Blair glanced at me. I couldn't tell if Yoren was just wasted and confused, or if he genuinely believed that we'd asked him to hang out. But even in my intoxicated state, I was entirely positive I'd never met this guy before. I thought maybe he'd been talking to someone else earlier and got us mixed up. Yoren handed the deck to Blair. Here, you shuffle too, just in case you think I'm messing with you. Blair took the cards awkwardly. Her fingers fumbled through the motions. She wasn't quite drunk enough to forget how, but just enough that it took her longer than it should have. Okay, he said, looking directly at Logan. Let's make this interesting. If I get your card right, you have to let me show you one more trick. Deal? Logan laughed. What kind of deal is that? A fair one, Yoren said, holding out his hand. Come on, shake on it. Logan hesitated for half a second until he reached out and shook his hand. Good, Yoren said, grinning again and taking the cards back from Blair. He turned to me next, holding out the deck. Your turn. I waved him off. I think they're shuffled enough. The words came out harsher than I meant them to. Yoren stared at me for a second. I couldn't tell if I'd pissed him off or maybe he was just trying to read me, but the deck stayed outstretched in his hand. He finally shrugged and pulled the cards back, still watching me. All right, he said, finally turning his attention back to Logan. Let's see what we've got. I took a sip of my beer and looked out at the hazy view below, trying to think of an escape plan from this magic show. Yoren shuffled one last time and held his hand over the deck like he was feeling for something. Then he pulled a card from the middle and held it up, a 9 of spades. Logan looked disappointed and shook his head. Yoren flipped the card over and stared at it. His face was twisted in confusion or frustration or something that didn't quite fit either. He held up a finger like he was asking for a second to think. Then his shoulders jerked. It looked like something yanked him from the inside. His mouth opened and he made this wet, choking sound. We all took a step back. Yoren dry-heaved twice and then a third time before his whole body convulsed. His head snapped forward like he was trying to fold in half. Then he puked, and the disgusting mess of beer and food was a wet and crumpled card between his feet. He bent down and picked it up, wiping it on his jeans. He held it up for us to see. On the card was a pig with its throat slit, blood dripping down its neck in thick streaks. In the corner, it showed a 6 of clubs. Is this your card? Yoren asked. Blair turned away fast, one hand covering her mouth. But Logan didn't move, only nodding his head slightly. He just stared at the card, or maybe at Yoren's hand holding it. Dude, what the fuck was that? I said, feeling annoyed and disgusted. Yoren looked at me, not at all embarrassed by his strange trick. It's his card, he said flatly. That's not his card, I shot back. His card was a 6 of clubs, not whatever the hell that is. Yoren tilted the card towards the light coming from inside. He squinted at it like he was checking his work. It's a 6 of clubs, he said again, pointing at the corner, marking beneath the bleeding pig. All right, man, whatever, I said, setting down my beer on the railing. I'm going back inside. No, wait. Yoren's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was cold and damp. I still have to show you my last trick. You agreed. I pulled back, but he held on tighter. Logan agreed, I said. Not me. Yoren looked at Logan and then back to me. He let go of my wrist and stepped backwards towards the railing. His heel scraped against the metal edge. Watch, he said. Then I heard Blair scream. I didn't process it at first. My brain was still catching up to what my eyes were seeing. Yoren had planted both his hands on the railing and swung his legs up and over, in one smooth motion like he was vaulting a fence. He fell backward into the open air. I leaned over and saw Joran tumbling through the dark. His arms stayed at his side. He made no sound as he fell until he disappeared into the fog. I didn't see him land, and I didn't hear anything either. Just the hum of traffic 10 floors below and Blair sobbing behind me. I took a step back from the railing and tried to decide if what I'd saw really just happened. I eventually broke from this trance and called 911. Blair was still crying, and Logan just stood there staring at the railing like Joran was gonna climb back up. The cops came fast, 2 officers and a paramedic. They separated us and took statements. They'd asked if I'd seen Joran drinking or if I'd seen him take anything. I could faintly hear Logan being interviewed behind me. He just kept repeating that Joran had jumped. After 20 minutes, another officer walked back onto the deck and told us they couldn't find a body. I thought maybe I'd misheard him. "What do you mean you can't find him?" I said. "There's no one down there," he said. "We checked the sidewalk, the street, the alley. Nothing." He asked me to show him exactly where Joran had gone over. I walked him to the railing and pointed to a vague spot in the fog. "Right here." He vaulted over and fell backwards. The officer leaned over and looked down. Then he looked at me. "You sure he jumped?" "Yes." He wrote something in his notebook and told us not to leave the city for a few days. We were all pretty messed up for a few weeks after that, but Logan took it the worst. It's one thing to watch someone jump. It's another thing entirely when the cops look at you like you're lying about it, like we had some reason to make up the whole thing. The school didn't know what to do with us. Normally they'd offer counseling and maybe some academic accommodations if someone had died. But no one had died, officially. There wasn't a body, so they just sort of watched us and waited to see if we'd fall apart. Logan stopped going to class for a while. Blair and I tried checking in on him, but he'd just say he was fine and shut the door. When he finally started showing up again, he looked thinner, a little hollowed out. I tried talking to him about it once. I asked if he wanted to grab food or just walk around campus. He said no, but then he asked me if I was sure we'd seen Joran jump. "Of course I'm sure," I said. He nodded, but he didn't look convinced. It was like he was testing me, or maybe testing himself. A few months later, when we started seeing Logan again, he was always hanging out with this guy named Ephraim. I remembered meeting him in the student center one day while I was grabbing coffee with Logan. He was pretty short with dark hair and a sharp face. Logan introduced us like they'd known each other for years. "This is Ephraim," he said. "We met in the library." Ephraim shook my hand. His grip was mechanically strong. "Logan's told me a lot about you," he said. After that, Ephraim was just around. Always with Logan, at the library, at lunch, walking around campus. Other than Blair and myself, he was the only person Logan seemed to talk to. Blair didn't like him. She never said it outright, but I could tell by the way she'd go quiet when he showed up, or how she'd find an excuse to leave early. To be honest, I didn't really like him either. There was something off about the way he'd be staring at you just before you were about to speak, as if he was a second ahead of everyone. But Logan seemed better when Ephraim was around, so we tolerated him. There was only one other time I tried to bring up Rosalind with Logan. We were at a bar about 3 months after, just the two of us. Logan was nursing a beer and staring at the table when I said, "Do you still think about that night?" He looked up. His expression didn't change, but his hand tightened around the bottle. "Which night?" "Come on, man, you know which one I'm talking about." I watched him take a slow drink and set the bottle down too carefully. "I don't know what happened that night," he said finally. "What do you mean you don't know?" I said, leaning forward, trying to get him to look at me in the eyes. "We all saw it. He jumped." Logan shook his head, not like he was disagreeing. or like he was trying to shake something loose. I'm not saying he didn't. I'm just saying I don't know anymore. Maybe we were all wasted. Maybe we saw something else and our brains filled in the rest. I'd never questioned it, not once. What we saw happened. Yoren jumped. The cops not finding a body didn't change that for me. But sitting across from Logan, watching him rewrite it in his head, I thought maybe that this was better for him. Maybe forgetting was the only way forward. If his brain needed to reclassify it as a drunk hallucination instead of an actual event, then that was okay with me. We graduated on a Saturday in May. The ceremony felt longer than it should have. Blair walked with a degree in political science, magna cum laude, like everyone expected. I'd finished economics with a mediocre 3.2 GPA. Logan had ended up with a degree in psychology, though he'd changed his major 3 times senior year. First from computer science, then briefly to philosophy before landing on psych. When I asked him about it, he just shrugged and said Ephraim had always told him that it was okay to change his mind. Blair's parents took us all out to dinner afterward at some place near the waterfront. After that, we all scattered. Blair started law school at GW that fall. I took a consultant job with a firm in DuPont. Logan packed up and moved to Utah for a PhD program in cognitive science. He said it was a good opportunity, but I didn't ask him why he needed to go that far. For 5 years, we barely spoke. Blair and I lived in the same city, but we never made plans. I'd seen her on the metro once or twice and we'd wave, but that was it. Logan sent a message every few months, generic stuff. How's work? How's the weather? I'd respond with something equally empty, and then we'd go quiet again. I told myself it was normal. People drift, college ends, and everyone moves on. But I knew it wasn't that simple. We were avoiding something, or maybe we were just avoiding each other. Then, one morning, almost 5 years exactly from our graduation, my phone buzzed. It was an old group chat with Logan and Blair. Hey, moving back to DC next month. Got a job with a biotech company downtown. We should meet up. Blair responded before I could. That's great. Let's do it. I typed back something similar. Logan got back to DC on a Wednesday in June. We met that first time at a Vietnamese place downtown. He looked better and healthier than I remembered. He filled out a bit and had grown a beard. When he'd talk about his PhD work, there was something steady in his voice that hadn't been there since I'd known him. Blair noticed it too. After he left, she said he seemed like he'd figured something out. Logan texted us again one Friday afternoon, asking if we wanted to meet at a place near Mount Vernon Triangle called American Bar. He said he was bringing one of his new work friends. I didn't think much of it until I walked into the bar and saw them at the corner table. Blair was already there, sitting across from Logan and the guy next to him. The guy had thick dark hair and some light facial hair. He was the same height and had the same cold way of sitting perfectly still. It was Ephraim. Martin, hey, Logan said, standing to shake my hand. This is Merrick. He works in my building. The guy stood and extended his hand. Good to meet you. His grip was just as strong as I remembered. Merrick just moved here from Texas, Logan continued. Went to A&M. I looked at Blair, who was seeming to avoid eye contact with either of them. She met my gaze, and I could tell she was thinking the same thing as me. Texas? I repeated. Yeah, Merrick said, smiling. Austin originally, but I did undergrad in College Station. His unplaceable accent still had the same effect on my brain as an out-of-tune guitar. I sat down and ordered a beer I suddenly didn't want. Logan kept talking about work and about how Merrick had helped him with some project he was struggling on. Merrick put a hand on his shoulder. "You're doing fine." Logan turned to Blair and asked how law school was going. She looked caught off guard and straightened in her chair. She said she was doing really well, that her grades were solid and she felt confident about everything she'd learned so far. She mentioned the bar exam was coming up soon and she had just started preparing. Blair then excused herself to the bathroom. I followed a minute later and found her in the hallway near the restrooms. "What the fuck is going on?" she whispered. "I know, it's weird," I said quietly. "Just go with it for now, I guess." Blair looked like she wanted to argue, but nodded and walked back towards the table. When I got back, Logan was telling Merrick some story about sophomore year, about the time we'd gotten lost trying to find a house party in Shaw and ended up at a bodega instead. Merrick laughed like he'd heard it before. Logan told another story about a time we'd skipped class to walk to the National Mall. Merrick just nodded along. After another 30 minutes, Blair checked her phone and said she had to go. 5 minutes later, I did the same. When I was outside, my phone buzzed. "Where can we meet?" I texted her back an address nearby and started walking. Blair was already waiting for me outside the coffee shop on 14th Street when I arrived. She looked frightened. Her arms were crossed tight over her chest despite the blistering heat. "That was him," she said before I could speak. "I know." "So what the hell's Logan doing?" I shook my head. "I have no idea." We started walking, neither of us wanting to stand still. "You think he's messing with us?" Blair asked. "Logan? No, that's not him." She paused. "Then what?" I really didn't have an answer. Logan wasn't the type to play games. He'd never been good at lying either. When he introduced Merrick, he looked completely sincere, like he genuinely believed we'd never met this guy before. "Maybe he forgot," I said, but even as the words came out, I knew how stupid they sounded. Blair stopped walking. "Forgot Ephraim? The guy he hung out with every day senior year. The only person he talked to besides us?" "Well, we need to ask him," I said. "And say what? Hey Logan, why are you pretending your college best friend is a stranger from Texas?" she argued. I considered it a moment, about pulling Logan aside and confronting him. But something about the whole thing made my stomach turn. Either Logan had completely forgotten about Ephraim, or he had become an extremely convincing actor while in Utah. "Let's just, let me think about it first," I said. Blair pulled out her phone and started scrolling. Her thumb moved fast, swiping through photos from senior year. Spring fling, graduation weekend, random nights at the bars. "There has to be something," she muttered. I watched her scroll back further, junior year, sophomore year, group shots at tailgates, pictures from that Ethiopian place we used to go to on U Street. Not a single picture of Ephraim. She opened Facebook next and typed his name into the search bar. After failing to find anything, she scrolled through her own tagged photos. "This doesn't make any sense," she said quietly. "I'll think of something," I said, although it was just because I couldn't think of anything else to say. Every morning of the following weeks, I woke up thinking about Logan and Merrick. Work felt impossible. I'd sit in meetings and realize I hadn't heard a single word anyone had said. The knot in my stomach never left. I attempted to express my unease to my coworkers in vague terms without revealing the actual details. hoping someone might say something reassuring without grasping the full picture. But the harder I tried, the clearer it became that no amount of external reassurance would ever help me make peace with what was happening. With a sudden rush of confidence, I texted Logan on a Tuesday morning. I casually asked him if he wanted to grab drinks on Friday night. "Yeah, sounds good," he replied. 20 minutes later, I added, "Bring Merrick if he's free." As soon as I hit send, I felt sick. Every fiber of my being screamed to distance myself from Merrick and whatever he was unfolding. But Logan was in trouble. I was certain of that, even though I couldn't express how. Blair and I met that afternoon at my apartment. She brought her laptop and a notebook like we were planning a heist. We met twice a week now, sometimes 3, sitting at bars or coffee shops, trying to piece together something that neither of us enjoyed discussing. It felt a little like college again, just the two of us talking late into the night, except now we were older and the problems we had were far greater consequence than we understood. "We need a picture," she said, sitting on my couch. "Something clearer, then we can run it through a reverse image search or maybe show it to people from Georgetown." I hated the idea that we needed some sort of proof for what was right in front of our face. I had no need for someone else to agree with me that this person was the same one I knew from college. And something about trying to get a subtle picture of Merrick made me uneasy, but I had no better idea, and I reluctantly agreed. Friday came, and we met at a place on 7th Street. Logan and Merrick were already there when I walked in. Logan waved me over. Something about him looked wrong. Not sick exactly, just dim, like someone had turned down the brightness in his eyes. They were glassy, and when he smiled, it didn't reach past his mouth. "Hey man," I said, shaking his hand. I sat across from Eric, trying to look normal. His dark hair was slicked to the side, and he seemed to watch me the whole time with a slight smile. I had this overwhelming sense that he knew I was onto him, and that he was enjoying it. The weaker part of me wanted to get up right there and then and just leave and let Logan defend for himself. Blair arrived 10 minutes later. She ordered a vodka soda and sat next to me. Logan droned on and on about work, and his sentences kept trailing off. Merrick would finish them, not really interrupting, just filling the gaps like he already knew what Logan was wanting to say. I waited until Logan got up to use the bathroom and pulled out my phone. I angled it towards Merrick like I was checking a message, but got cold feet in the last second. I felt like I was doing something I shouldn't be, taking pictures of someone without them knowing. It felt strangely cowardly. Why weren't we just asking him who he was? Why weren't we just confronting Logan? Blair seemed to sense my trepidation and asked Merrick where in the city he was living, creating a diversion for me. I held my breath and tapped the camera icon twice, snapping 2 quick shots. Merrick's eyes flicked towards me, but he didn't say anything, other than that he was staying with a friend for now. Blair couldn't seem to find a response for this. After a few awkward moments of silence, Merrick leaned forward slightly. His face bore some expression I hadn't seen on him before. "He doesn't remember me. Isn't that funny?" he said quietly. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick. I turned to Blair and her face was a white mask. We waited for something further from him. I expected him to explain some sort of inside joke or anything to clarify what he just said, but nothing ever came. He just looked at us. Before either of us could respond, Logan returned to the table. My fear suddenly turned into something sharper before I could stop it. I felt a rush of blood to my head. "Logan," I said, cutting through whatever he was saying, "do you ever talk to Ephraim from Georgetown?" Logan stopped mid-sentence. His face went blank for a second, like he was searching for the name in his head. I watched Merrick through my periphery, but he seemed entirely unfazed. "Ephraim?" Logan said slowly. He looked at Blair and then back to me. "Yeah, I mean, not in a while. He said he was moving to Poland after he graduated." Poland, I repeated. Yeah, he got some job there. We texted for a bit, but you know how it goes. People drift. Merrick nodded along and added, that is how it goes. People change, memories change. Blair stared into her drink and remained frozen in some kind of purgatory between fear, confusion, and contempt. The next hour dragged on, and Logan started talking about work again, trying to fill an awkward silence. At one point, he mentioned considering a job change, maybe leaving the tech company for something in research. Merrick put a hand on his shoulder. There's no shame in changing your mind about your path. We left soon after. Blair and I pretended we were walking towards the metro stop together, while Merrick and Logan went the opposite direction. When I couldn't see them anymore, I pulled out my phone and opened up the Photos app. My face went cold when I saw them. Where Merrick should have been was just a blur, a smear of light and shadow, like someone had dragged their thumb across the screen. The second photo was the same. Blair stared at the screen. What's wrong with your phone? I closed the app and reopened it, briefly wishing that there was something wrong with my phone. I don't know what this is, I said, feeling frustrated. Did I miss? He was sitting right there. Blair looked disappointed and frustrated as well. She pinched the bridge of her nose and let out a breath that sounded more like a groan. I can't deal with this right now. The bar's in 3 weeks. I'm barely sleeping as it is. I felt bad for her, but I also felt like this was something that we needed to deal with. Blair, we need to figure this out. You heard what Merrick said. We need to talk to Logan. And say what exactly? That his friend won't photograph properly, so we think he's lying to us? She looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, she seemed defeated. Blair started walking again, faster this time. What if he really doesn't remember? What if something's actually wrong with him? She said. That was my whole point, but I didn't bother to spell it out for her. Then we help him remember, I said. She stopped under a streetlight and turned to face me. Her eyes looked tired in a way that went deeper than studying. I need a few days, maybe a little more, she said. I'm gonna take the bar next week, so once that's done, then we can do this together, okay? I wanted to argue. It didn't feel like we had a week, but I could see how this was affecting her. Over the course of the next week, I tried calling Blair 3 times before she finally picked up. When she did, her voice came through the line sounding flat and distant. She told me with no precursor that she had failed the bar exam. I didn't know what to say at first. I hadn't even considered it as a possibility. This wasn't the Blair I knew. The Blair I knew never failed anything. Not in high school, not at Georgetown, not once in law school as far as I knew. She studied less than everyone else and still pulled higher grades. It was just how things worked for her. But now her voice sounded hollow. She kept apologizing for not texting back all week and for going quiet and not being available. She said she couldn't sleep and that she kept replaying the exam in her head, question by question, knowing exactly where she'd screwed up. I told her it was fine and that she could retake it and that lots of people fail the bar on their first try. She didn't respond. I could hear her breathing on the other end. It was slow and deliberate, like she was trying to hold something back. I made an awkward and premature transition of the subject when I mentioned Logan and Merrick. This caused her to go silent for a long time. She finally broke her silence and said she couldn't do it right now, and that she needed more time. I tried to push back, but it felt weak even as I was doing it. I told her we needed to figure this out, that waiting any longer didn't make sense, but my argument was hollow and unsympathetic. She said she needed space and that she couldn't think straight right now. I relented and told her to let me know when she was ready and wished her luck. I sat on my couch staring at my phone for a long time after that. I thought about calling Logan myself, just the two of us. I tried to play it out in my head, what would happen if I asked him who Merrick was, if I told him what Merrick had said to us at the bar. But what if he really didn't remember Ephraim? What if something was broken in his head and confronting him made it worse? A thought crept in that I didn't want to acknowledge, the same thought I'd had back in college when I tried to ask Logan about Rosalind. Maybe as long as Logan was okay, it didn't matter. He seemed fine at the bar, maybe a little slow, but not dangerous, not hurting anyone, just living his life with Merrick or Ephraim or whoever the hell that was. Maybe that was enough. I hated myself for thinking it, but I couldn't shake the thought loose. Weeks passed. I thought that time away from Logan and Blair would help me care less about the situation, but the opposite happened. I felt more confident than ever that I needed to talk to Logan. But I still felt like I had to wait for Blair. I told myself it was better to do it together, that confronting him alone might make things worse. But really, I just think I didn't want to do it myself. I checked my phone more than I should have. I scrolled through old messages and drafted texts that I never sent. Then, finally one afternoon in late September, I got a message from Blair. "Hey, I'm sorry for being so distant. Can we meet up in a few days? We can talk about Logan. Also, I've been seeing someone new and I was hoping he can come. He's been helping me out with a lot of stuff. But he doesn't have to if you don't want." The fact that she was seeing someone felt strange, but not bad. Just unexpected. Blair hadn't mentioned dating anyone in years, but maybe that was good. Maybe she'd found someone that pulled her out of whatever hole she'd been in. I called her back quickly. She offered Thursday evening at a coffee shop near Logan Circle. I agreed and spent the next 3 days trying to think of what I was going to say to her. By the time Thursday arrived, it felt like I had a whole script in my head. I got there 15 minutes early and chose a table by the window where I could watch the street. The coffee shop was nearly empty. Just a couple typing on laptops near the back and a barista wiping down the counter. I ordered something I didn't want and sat down, checking my phone every 30 seconds like it would make Blair show up faster. When I finally looked up, I saw her walking towards the entrance from across the street. Next to her was a taller guy with dark hair slicked to the side. It was Merrick. I felt all my muscles tighten up. I just sat there, staring through the glass as they crossed the street together. Blair was smiling at something he'd said. He had his hand on the small of her back. My fight-or-flight response triggered, but I forced myself to stay seated. They pushed through the door and Blair spotted me immediately. She waved and came over, pulling him alongside. I expected some sort of explanation, but all she said was, "Martin, it's good to see you. This is Adrian, my boyfriend." He sat down across from me and I just stared at him, and then at Blair, and then back to him again. Blair settled into the chair beside Adrian, her hand resting on his arm with an ease that made my skin crawl. I watched her fingers curl around his sleeve like they'd been together for years instead of a few weeks. "I know I've been kind of MIA lately," she said apologetically. "The bar exams really messed with my head, but he's been really great, helping me see things more clearly." She glanced at him, and he gave her this small, reassuring smile that made her whole expression shift into something I didn't recognize. "Anyway," Blair continued, turning back to me, "I thought it would be good for us all to sit down and finally talk about Logan. We should figure out what we're going to do." I kept staring at Adrian. "What have you told him of Logan?" The words came out rough and contemptuous. Blair blinked like I had asked her a question in a foreign language. "What have I told him?" she repeated. "Everything. The party in Rosalind, Yoren, how Logan's been acting weird with his friend from work. All of it." She squeezed his hand. Adrian's been really helpful, actually. He has this way of looking at things that make them seem less, I don't know, less impossible. She tilted her head, studying me. Why? What's wrong? I kept staring, searching her face for any sign that this was some kind of plan I wasn't aware of, or some elaborate test, but there was nothing, just genuine confusion and something defensive creeping into her posture. I thought you'd be happy I have support, she added. You were the one who kept pushing us to deal with this. I slid an empty plate away from me on the table and took a moment to gather myself. I then pointed at Adrian and looked Blair dead in the face. That's him, I said. That's Merrick and Ephraim. How the hell do you not see that? Blair's expression shifted from confusion to something harder. What are you talking about? Him, I said, my voice rising, sitting right next to you. That's the same guy Logan brought to the bar. It's the same guy from Georgetown. Adrian leaned back in his chair while his face remained far too calm for the accusations being thrown at him. I think there has been some kind of misunderstanding, he said. No, I cut him off. There's no misunderstanding. You're the same person. Some of the patrons of the coffee shop started to look at our table. Blair's hand tightened around Adrian's arm. Martin, I've just met Adrian a few weeks ago. You're not making any sense. I could feel my blood boiling. Every muscle in my body wanted to flip the table and walk out, but I forced myself to stay seated. Adrian spoke again. I understand this must be stressful for you, Martin. Blair mentioned you've been worried about your friend. Sometimes when we're anxious, our minds can make connections that aren't really there. If you don't want to talk about this, that's okay. You can always change your mind. I stared at him and then at Blair. She was nodding along. Are you even listening to yourself? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You failed the bar, Blair. For the first time in your entire life, something didn't come easy to you. And then what? A few weeks later, you just happen to meet some guy who looks, talks, acts, and is exactly like Ephraim and Merrick, and he's helping you see things more clearly? Blair's jaw tightened in defense. What are you trying to say? That I've lost my mind or something? She let go of Adrian's arm and leaned forward. So you think I'm what? Too stupid to know who I'm dating? That I can't tell the difference between someone I met a few weeks ago and someone from college? Adrian put a gentle but possessive hand on Blair's shoulder. His expression remained calm and sympathetic. I looked directly at Blair, ignoring him. I'm saying that something is very wrong here, and you are just not seeing that. She shook her head and stood up. You know what? I think I'm done here. I came to talk about Logan, not to get attacked. I'm tired of this. For once in my life, I've found someone who actually makes me feel better about myself, and you're trying to ruin it. She grabbed her bag from the back of the chair and turned towards the door. For a split second, as Adrian moved to follow her, his eyes met mine, and he smiled. The smile contorted his face into something inhuman. It was the smile of something damned enjoying its work, something that delighted in corruption. I watched Blair disappear through the door while Adrian got up to follow her. All of my nerves fired at once. My chair flew backward, and before I could make any conscious decision to do so, I had my hands around Adrian's neck. The skin felt like sandpaper as I yanked him backwards. He fell with a loud thud and made no movement to break his fall, his arms staying perfectly to his sides as his head slammed against the floor. For a long moment, he didn't move. He just laid there like I dropped a mannequin. Someone screamed. Maybe it was the barista, but I didn't care. I grabbed a butter knife from the table next to me and dropped my knees on his chest, pressing the dull blade into his throat. Tell her, I said. Tell her who you really are. Adrian's head tilted up at me. His eyes were calm and glassy. They almost seemed bored. I've already been accepted, he said quietly. His voice didn't even sound strained with my weight pressing down on him. He said it again like he was explaining something obvious to a child. My mind toyed with the idea of plunging the knife into Adrian, not because I really wanted to kill him, but I wanted to see if he was truly human. I wanted to see if he would actually bleed. Before I could make my mind up, someone tackled me from behind. My head cracked against the base of the table, and the butter knife skittered away. They held me from behind around the neck, and I couldn't fight back. I twisted my head around just enough to see Adrian standing up. He didn't even use his hands. His body just lifted itself upright like someone was pulling him by a string. He looked down at me in silence for a long moment before he quietly said, "There will come a day." Then he simply turned and walked out the door. It's been 2 months since that night at the coffee shop. That night, the cops came and I foolishly gave them an explanation that included my accusations of Adrian. I told them he was meeting people under false identities and tricking them. I tried to tell them that he had done this twice already to both my friends. I told them how it all started with Joran and how they couldn't find a body. They placed me on a 72-hour psychiatric hold. I told them I wasn't crazy, that something was wrong with my friends, that something had gotten to them and they were still in trouble. They would only nod and write things down. When they released me, they said the person that I attacked could still press charges if he wanted, but they couldn't get in contact with him. Instead, they ordered me to attend court-mandated therapy, twice a week, non-negotiable. Blair got a restraining order, and I'm not allowed within 500 feet of her. Logan won't return any of my calls, and his number might be disconnected now. I can't tell anymore. I haven't slept more than 3 hours a night since it's happened. Every time I close my eyes, I see Adrian, or Merrick, or Ephraim, or whatever you want to call him. I see his face while I hold a knife to his throat. I told one friend about it. We were drinking at his place, and it all came spilling out. Joran jumping off the deck, Ephraim appearing out of nowhere, the way Merrick, Adrian, and Ephraim were all the same person, but nobody could see it except me. He listened to me the whole time without interrupting. When I finished, he set his beer down, and he asked if I'd considered talking to someone professionally. The worst part isn't that people think I'm crazy. It's that I'm starting to wonder if they're right. Some nights I pull up those blurred photos on my phone and stare at them until my eyes hurt, trying to convince myself they prove something. But what if my camera was just broken? What if I really did attack some innocent guy because I was stressed and sleep-deprived and paranoid? What if there was never a body in Roslyn because nothing actually happened that night? I don't know anymore. My therapist's office is in Foggy Bottom, tucked between a law firm and that Peruvian restaurant. I was skeptical before the first session. I didn't know what I could possibly gain from talking to someone who'd never understand my experiences. The intake forms asked if I'd ever experienced psychosis or delusions. I left those blank. Dr. Dorian turned out to be much younger than I expected, but quickly helped me see things differently over the next few weeks. He said I'd been carrying too much weight for too long, that my mind had created connections to make sense of trauma I'd never properly processed. He told me Joran probably survived the fall and left before the police arrived, embarrassed about his public breakdown. That the body was never found because there was never a body to find in the first place. He said Ephraim, Merrick, and Adrian were likely just people who reminded me of each other, and my stressed brain had conflated them. That I'd been so fixated on protecting Logan and Blair that I'd invented a threat where none existed. He suggested that I stop trying to contact Logan and Blair, that reaching out only enforced my delusions and prevented me from healing. Anytime I would bring up what I felt like was my duty to Logan, you would challenge me. This fixation on saving your friends suggests you might struggle with control issues. Have you considered that they don't need saving, that they're actually better off without your interference? You know what I think is your real problem, Martin? His voice was softer than usual. You can't accept that your friends made choices. Logan chose Ephraim, Blair chose Adrian. They weren't tricked or corrupted. They simply decided they wanted something different than what you could offer them. And the hardest part, he continued, is accepting that those choices had nothing to do with you. You weren't enough to keep them, and that's okay. It doesn't make you a failure, it makes you replaceable. He took a long pause and stood from his chair. You don't have to trust what you saw, Martin. You just have to be willing to change your mind.